So, how does a republic that's lasted for 500 years just die? Well, it's not with a bang, it's with a single choice. And today, we're going to pinpoint that exact moment, the decision that really sealed the Roman Republic's fate. When you think about the fall of Rome, you probably picture burning cities, right? Barbarians at the gates. But that's not what we're talking about here. The story of how the Republic died, well, it's actually way more chilling. It wasn't some big, sudden explosion. Nope, it was quiet, kind of sneaky even. It came from the inside. There was no epic last battle for the soul of the Republic, no heroic final stand. Instead, the whole thing, this 500-year-old system, it just came apart, all because of one decision, made by one guy at one single point in time. So, what was it? What was this decision that could topple a giant? Well, to really get it, first, we've got to understand the system itself. We need to look at the rules of the game that held Rome together for so long. Okay, so let's dive in. It all boils down to one central, deep-seated fear. This one fear shaped everything about the Roman Republic. It was baked right into its political DNA for, 500 years. And that fear, it was a fear of kings. Yeah, after they kicked out their last monarch way back in 509 BC, the Romans became absolutely obsessed with making sure no single person could ever get that much power again. You could almost think of their whole political system as a kind of immune system, built specifically to find and neutralize the threat of a dictator. And they built all these clever safeguards right into the government. For starters, power was always divided up between a bunch of different officials. Nobody had it all. And your job was always temporary. You couldn't just stay in office forever. But here's the big one, the most important rule of all. When a general finished a campaign, he had to become a private citizen again. And crucially, no army was ever legally allowed to cross from the provinces back into Italy. That was the ultimate firewall. And this is so important, you guys. The Romans knew exactly where the biggest threat was going to come from. It wasn't some invading army from another country. No, the thing they were most terrified of was one of their own. A super successful, super popular, really ambitious general, coming home at the head of an army that was loyal to him personally. Okay, so that's the setup. Now let's bring in the main players, because this is where that system gets put to the ultimate test. It's basically the irresistible force meeting the immovable object of Roman law. And this really lays out the standoff perfectly, right? In one corner, you've got Julius Caesar. He's this massive national hero. He just conquered all of Gaul, and he's got these legions of soldiers who are fiercely loyal to him, not necessarily to the state. And in the other corner, you have the Senate. They're the legal power in Rome, and they are terrified of how popular and powerful Caesar has become, so they decide to lay a trap. So the Senate makes its move. And technically, what they did was totally by the book. They ordered Caesar to disband his army and come back to Rome as a private citizen. But here's the thing. Everybody knew what was really going on. Caesar knew that the second he gave up his army, his political enemies in the Senate would pounce. They'd prosecute him, have him exiled, his career would be over. This wasn't just a legal order, it was a political death sentence. And that brings us to this little river in northern Italy. It's just a geographical line on a map, but for the Republic, it was the ultimate political red line. This is it. This is the point of no return. So, picture this. Caesar gets to the bank of this river, the Rubicon, and he's stuck. He has an absolutely impossible choice to make. Option 1, he obeys the Senate. He gives up his army, walks into Rome alone, and lets his enemies destroy him. Option 2, he disobeys. He crosses the river with his army, which is an act of high treason, and kicks off a massive, bloody civil war. The stories say he actually paused there, on the riverbank, really thinking about what was about to happen. And then he says it. Just 3 words. The die is cast. The choice was made. There was no going back. And let's be super clear here. This wasn't like, breaking some minor rule. Crossing the Rubicon with an army was the biggest political no-no imaginable. It was a direct statement. It was him saying, my power, backed by my army, is now more important than the law of the Republic. So, what happens next? A civil war breaks out, sure. But why was this one act so much more damaging than the war itself? Well, it all comes down to the danger of setting a new precedent. After Caesar wins the war, something really weird happens. On the surface, things kind of look the same. The Senate still meets, they still elect officials. It all looks like the Republic is still there.
But it's just a shell. The foundation underneath it all had been completely shattered.
Why? Because Caesar's decision created a new, unwritten rule for how to get power in Rome. And the new rule was simple. Real power doesn't come from laws or elections anymore. It comes from having the biggest army. It belongs to whoever has the soldiers. And you can see just how fast this all happened. Look at this. 49 BC, Caesar crosses the Rubicon, breaks the rule. Just 5 years later, he gets assassinated by senators who are desperately trying to save the Republic. But it's already too late. The dominoes are falling. Less than 20 years after that, his adopted son Augustus becomes the very first emperor. And just like that, the Republic is officially dead, gone for good. So in the end, it wasn't some slow, gradual decay that killed the Republic. It died because one man broke one single fundamental rule. He had a choice, his own power or the survival of the system. And he chose power. Once that ultimate firewall was breached, that was it. The system had nothing left to protect itself. And that leaves us with a pretty heavy question, one that's still relevant today. Once a core rule is broken by someone who's powerful enough to get away with it, is it even a rule anymore? Or is it just a memory of how things were supposed to work?